In this video, I'm going to show you how to create a fun 3D animated image in Photoshop. It doesn't really matter if you have a phone or a fancy DSLR, the techniques used are still the same. Let's get started. So I've already taken a series of images on my phone using burst mode, and burst mode lets you take a bunch of rapid fire photos as you hold down the shutter button. If I open the first image and hold my right arrow to cycle through them, you can see that I simply moved side to side as I took these images. So to take your own pictures, all you have to do is point your camera at something and take 3 or more photos while you slowly move from one side to another. The main tip is to try to keep the camera pointed at your subject the whole time. And as long as you do a somewhat decent job of that, we can line everything up in Photoshop. The other thing to remember is that if you took a series of images using burst mode like me, you'll have to skip 2 or 3 frames in between the images that you're actually using in order to get a good amount of movement in the final effect. So we'll choose some random images and we're going to keep a couple frames of space in between the ones that we choose. So I'm going to start with this one and I'll drag it into Photoshop. And then I'll go back to my images and I'll skip 2 frames and select this one, skip 2 more frames and select this one. So I have my next 2 frames selected and I'm going to drag that into the document in Photoshop and hit enter to place those. And the next thing that we want to do is to make sure all of these layers are aligned. Now there is a way to auto-align the layers, but it can be hit or miss, and in our case there's only 3 layers to do, so it's faster just to do it manually. So I'm going to zoom in here and go to the eyes because that is what we want our 3D effect to orbit around. And I'm going to hide this top layer and then I'll select the second layer and set the opacity to 50%. And then I'm just going to drag it around until the eyes line up. And you could also use the arrow keys to nudge it to be a little more precise. So once I've lined up the eyes, I'm going to set the opacity back to 100% and I'll turn back on my top layer and select that. And again, I'll set that to 50%. And I'll do the same thing, so I'll drag the image and then nudge it so the eyes align. Then I'll come back and set the opacity to 100% for that layer again. Next, I'm going to come up and choose Window, Timeline, and I'm going to click Create Frame Animation. So the animation will create 1 frame automatically, and I'm going to create a total of 4 frames. So I'm going to click this New Frame icon, and then I'll click that 2 more times, so now I have a total of 4 frames. So if I go to the first frame, you'll notice that I have all 3 of these layers turned on. So for the second frame, I'm going to turn off the top layer, and for the third frame, I'll turn off the top and the middle layer. And for the fourth frame, I'll again turn off the top layer. So if I click through these frames, you'll see that it's showing the top layer, then the middle, then the bottom, then the middle, and then it loops back to the beginning and shows the top layer again. So now we have a looping animation cycling through our 3 frames. So I'm going to make sure the first frame selected and holding shift, I'll click the 4th frame. Then I'll click this little arrow down next to the 0 seconds mark. And I'll change our delay to 0.1 seconds. Now if I move my image and zoom in a bit and hit play, you can see that our 3D animated effect is working. Now, keep in mind that Photoshop has a little bit of delay when you're trying to preview this, and it will turn out even better once you export it. Next, I'm going to crop my image, and I'm going to use a 4:5 ratio so it can be posted to Instagram pretty easily. And I'm going to get a little bit tighter. It's easier to see the effect the closer you crop it. Now I'm going to press Ctrl, Shift, Alt, and S, and that's going to bring up my Save for Web dialog. So over here on the right, I'm going to come over and change JPEG to GIF. And then this is where you set all your settings. So the most important thing is that you set your looping options to forever, and you'll probably want to resize this. So I'm going to set the width to about 1080 pixels. And from here you can save it anywhere you want and use it online. Now keep in mind that Instagram doesn't natively allow GIF uploads, so you can use an app to convert your GIF to a video format or just post it to Facebook or somewhere else. It might seem a little complicated at first, but once you've gone through the process a few times, you'll be able to create a lot of animated 3D GIFs in just a few minutes each. That's it for now, guys. If you like this tutorial, make sure you hit subscribe and follow us on social media so you don't miss our next video. I'm JT Shaver for New Layer. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.